Welcome back to the Bedtime with Cousin Vinny series, exclusively done on YouTube. We've been doing little 15-minute segments of my critically acclaimed national hit book, The Devil's Glove, trying to bring some more interest up. And of course, I'm nationally critically acclaimed Christian author. Why limit me? I'm nationally critically acclaimed author, Cousin Vinny Agnello, and when we get done teasing you with this wonderful morality tale that the country loves so much, you can at any point call that number back there, and you'll get your own discounted version of The Devil's Glove, and of course I will autograph it, personalize it, and all that other stuff, and it'll be done very economically for you. Anyway, let's get back to the book, because I know you don't want to listen to me too long. Alright, we left you off at the last segment on page 109 of the second edition of The Devil's Glove. And we're still at the Little League ballpark. Eddie Romano's having his big day. And I do believe a rally is coming. The crowd in the bleachers became strangely quiet, almost as if they sensed an impending rally by their much maligned Astros. Rocco spit out his bubblegum and threw it toward Johnny in an intimidating manner. Johnny shrugged it off and waited patiently in the batter's box. Rocco sneered at him as he pitched from the stretch position. He delivered a high fastball, ball 2. Rocco kicked some dirt off the mound, removed his hat, and took a deep breath. He immediately started his approach and promptly delivered ball 3 inside. The Tigers manager screamed at Rocco, "Pitch to him, son! Throw strikes! They can't hit you, Rock!" Johnny, while waiting in the batter's box, blew Rocco a kiss. He knew that Rocco had to throw him a strike. He also knew that it was going to be a good one, since he figured Rocco would assume that he was going to take it. Johnny had other plans in his mind. Rocco started his approach and delivered a waist-high fastball over the center of the plate. Johnny began salivating as he drove that meatball into center field for the Astros' first hit of the ball game. Keith decided to play it safe and halted at second base. With runners on first and second, Eddie stepped up to the plate. "Park one, Eddie! He's rattled, Eddie! You've got him, my boy! Take him deep, Eddie!" Mr. Romano cheered boisterously. The bleachers suddenly came to life as the parents stomped their feet and clapped their hands in a synchronized manner. Omnipresent was the sound of boom, 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 boom. The booming sound was all that could be heard, and it filled the air in a repetitive and rhythmic manner. A chant of "Eddie! Eddie!" could be distinctly heard from the crowd, which was now firmly behind the underdog. Eddie planted himself almost on top of home plate and choked up on the bat handle, just as the babe suggested. Rocco gave him an intimidating stare as he began his approach. He studied Rocco's release point and knew the fastball was coming. It soared toward his head, and he evaded it at the last second. He sneered back at Rocco as he arrogantly crowded home plate once again. Rocco angrily began his approach, and Eddie watched the 3/4 overhead release, which amounted to a changeup, crossed the plate for a strike. He sensed that a fastball was forthcoming, so he choked up on his bat even farther. The crowd began to cheer once again, but Eddie heard nothing As he completely focused in on the task at hand, Rocco began his approach and released the ball directly over top. Eddie knew immediately what was coming. He read the laces of the fastball as it approached the plate. He began his swing very early so that he could get the bat all the way around on it. Suddenly there was contact. Eddie's bat located the knee-high fastball on the thickest part of the aluminum barrel. Eddie's upward swing propelled the fastball rapidly over the left field fence and out of the ballpark. It was one of the longest home runs anyone had ever seen hit in a Little League game. The crowd erupted with applause as Eddie stared up into the air, following the flight of his monumental home run. Simultaneously, Rocco threw his mitt down in disgust. In the bleachers, Mr. Romano turned to Rocco's father with his hand extended. Rocco's father reluctantly reached into his pocket and put a crisp $100 bill in Mr. Romano's awaiting hand. "Pleasure doing business with you, sucker," Mr. Romano snickered as he tucked the $100 bill into his shirt pocket. Mrs. Romano screamed out, "That's my boy! He did it, Vince! He really did it!" Eddie danced around the base pads in the most obnoxious of manners. He stepped on home plate and jumped for joy. His teammates greeted him as he entered the dugout. They chanted simultaneously, "But don't touch his glove! Don't touch his glove!" He even found a bit of humor in their needling and let out a suppressed chuckle. "Fellas, that one was compliments of the babe," Eddie bragged. Billy Ray, who'd been sitting on the bench for the entire game, said, "Hey, Eddie, tell the babe to give me some hitting instructions too." Eddie ignored the friendly remark and sat alone at the end of the dugout. In the 6th inning, Eddie turned a double play to give the Astros their first victory over the Tigers, 3-1. End of chapter. Schizophrenic. Eddie's baseball success snowballed after the Tiger game. The regulars who followed the team were amazed at his progress. During the games, there was much debate by Astros fans as to the reasons for Eddie's suddenly blossoming into one of the top players in the league. Eddie became the team's superstar, and his quirkiness was often discussed in whispers. The elder Romanos, who attended each and every game, were well aware of all the conjecture surrounding their son's successes. Many times they discussed the issue with him and were always given the same illogical answer. "I've improved so much because of the magic in the glove, and because I'm getting great instruction from my dream coach, the Babe in Gehrig." Mr. Romano always wrote his son's answers off as the product of an overactive imagination, but Mrs. Romano took the matter a lot more seriously. She became genuinely concerned with her son's mental health. One evening after school, she sat Eddie down at the kitchen table and questioned him repeatedly about the long phone conversations he'd been engaging in. She insisted on knowing who he was really talking to. He kept insisting that he spoke for hours to Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. As you may have anticipated, his mother did not believe him. In fact, his answers did nothing but infuriate her. She was bound and determined to prove him a liar. She decided that the only way to definitively prove her point was to monitor his phone conversations. She figured that if she caught him in a lie, he'd have to start leveling with her. She was mistaken. One evening, she waited quietly in the hallway outside Eddie's bedroom and listened intently with her ear up against the door. For hours, she waited, hoping to catch him on the phone, conversing with one of his make-believe friends. At last, on this particular evening, her patience paid off. She could clearly hear Eddie picking up the phone and discussing his game with some unknown person. She immediately raced over to her own bedroom and picked up the receiver that she had ingeniously removed the mouthpiece from earlier in the day. Her interruption into the conversation was therefore supposedly unnoticed. She listened carefully for another voice, but the only one she heard was Eddie's. There was no one on the line. All she heard was a dial tone and Eddie speaking to persons unknown. That figures. So she's on the line? Well, she doesn't believe that I really talk to you. Can she hear you? No? Well, that makes sense, and it's probably for the better. I don't think she's cool enough to handle this situation. Mrs. Romano hung up the phone and raced over and barged into Eddie's bedroom, screaming, "You little bastard! You've been lying to me. I know that you're not talking to anyone. Damn it, Eddie, you better start telling me the truth." "I am telling you the truth. You just can't hear 'em," Eddie countered. "You insolent little brat. You're going to sit there and continue to lie to me even after I catch you in the act? Your father's going to hear about this one. You hear me? You need help. I think you're crazy. I think you got a screw loose. I'm going to start bringing you to the doctor." "Why, Mom? I'm not sick." "We'll see about that, Mr. Man," she fumed. Mrs. Romano slammed his bedroom door and door closed and raced down the stairs. She could feel her blood pressure rising as she waited impatiently for her husband's arrival. She thought that at last the truth was finally going to be known and that her son was finally going to start getting the psychological treatment he so desperately needed. Next chapter. A conspiracy is brewing. His mother's shenanigans were the least of Eddie's worries. He wasn't perturbed about seeing doctors and things like that because he had more serious issues to deal with. At school, he had overheard some kids talking about how he was going to get what was coming to him. These kids were unaware or tight-lipped about the details, but at least he now knew that something was being planned in retribution for the beating he gave Johnny Mitchell. From that moment on, he was on, quote, red alert. When he walked to and from class, his head was on a swivel, swiveling constantly, looking back to see if anyone dangerous approached. Johnny Mitchell was a very popular kid, and he wanted some payback for what he considered a senseless and ruthless beating that he took at the hands of Eddie at that Astros game. He didn't know when this great event was going to take place, but he did know that he was definitely going to get even with Eddie Romano. His plan was to take away and burn the only thing that Eddie seemed unable to live without, his precious baseball glove. Johnny just needed to find the right moment to strike. He had tried to recruit some help in this endeavor, but there were no volunteers. His friends told him that Eddie was obviously emotionally disturbed and that they didn't want to trigger someone like that. Everybody knew about the pounding Johnny took in the dugout, and nobody wanted to be the victim the next time he flew into a rage. The whole middle school thought Eddie was just plain unstable, especially if it had anything to do with that baseball glove of his. Most kids thought Johnny was off his rocker when he spoke of getting even with Eddie, except for a new kid named Eric Best. Eric Best had moved in from Indiana. and had a lot of disciplinary problems at his old school. He was a straight-up greaser. His dad was an auto mechanic, and he spent a lot of time working on engines alongside him. He mimicked everything about his dad, including smoking cigarettes. He always came to school with dirt underneath his nails and portrayed himself as a tough guy. He was eager to make a name for himself at his new school and reveled in the fact that the school's most popular kid had befriended him. It was plain to see that Eric Best was fast becoming Johnny Mitchell's new right-hand man. They went everywhere together, and kids joked about how they were joined at the hip.